Hi everyone, you're listening to Your Religion podcast. My name is Simona Love, and this is a podcast where we learn about world religions from the hearts and mouths of their followers. And today with us we have Shayndl, and she is here to tell us about Judaism. So let's start with a little introduction. So Shayndl, tell us about yourself. What do you do in your life? What part your faith plays in your life? And then we can go ahead and jump in.
Hi, my name is Shayndl. I am a teacher at a local girls' school, private Jewish girls' school. I teach 5th and 7th grade English and social studies. And I'm also a freelance artist, and I do lots of cosmere art and lots of other fandoms as well. So that's kind of like my main everyday is teaching and artwork.
That's so cool. Like, Shayndl and I have so much in common. I actually didn't know that you were a teacher. I thought you were just like an artist like me. But yeah, I know Shayndl from art and specifically from fantasy art and like fantasy conventions. And if I remember correctly, you first knew my husband, Caden, right?
Yeah, I think I met him on TikTok, or like I first started to get to know him on TikTok. And then we just kind of, got to know each other, which was really cool. And then I got to meet both of you at Dragonsteel, which was awesome.
Oh, that's so funny. I love that. Okay, and Caden has been telling me that, Shayndl, she's like a Jew. And like Caden and I, we love different religions. We love studying different religions. We're actually taking a course about it right now. And he was like, and she like posts about these like cool Jewish things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to interview her. So yes, please tell me about your faith. And let's start with the thing that matters most. So where do we come from according to Judaism?
Okay, so yes, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I think that it's pretty clear. Like the first line in the Bible, or what we call the Torah, is Bereshis bara Elokim. So that's that translates to in the beginning God created, and so I think that's a pretty succinct way. So we believe that there's one God, and He created the world, the heavens, and everything in between. That's Judaism in a nutshell. Is basically that's like the main core tenet is, God, there's one God and He created everything. That's really all you have to know.
Yeah, gotcha. And I'm always curious to find out what faiths believe in this, but do you believe that like our spirits existed before, or that our spirits are created as we're born?
There is a concept of, there's the concept of the neshama, or the soul. And there is a concept that there were many souls that were created. It is a little bit tricky when you get into stuff like pre the world being created. A lot of that is very, very esoteric and difficult to understand. But also, for example, by when the Torah was given at Sinai, so we do believe that like all of the souls were there. So this is why we'll say we were all at Sinai, even though obviously physically we weren't there. So we do believe that yes, there are many souls, and then we also believe that that the soul goes into the baby before they're born. So yeah, this is a concept. This is definitely a concept that is heavily discussed.
Okay, that's really cool. And the next question that always interests me is, what do you believe happens after death, and therefore, what is the purpose of life?
So obviously this is something that I don't have a lot of experience in, thank God. But I can tell you what Judaism teaches. So Judaism teaches that after death, there's a reunification of the soul to God, meaning that we believe that the part of you that is godly is the soul, or what we call the neshama, and that is put into a physical body. And during death, that is the neshama, or the soul, the spiritual part of us, returns back to God, and there's a reunification with God. That's so I think there's a lot of really interesting things that go into what Jews believe in terms of like heaven, and you hear a lot of like conflicting things, like do we believe in heaven, do we not? I feel like there's so much conflicting information out there, but we definitely do believe in reward and punishment. We definitely do believe in a form of heaven, but mostly it's just a reunification with God, and that is the soul. That's what makes the soul the happiest, is that that joining with God, that reunification with God.
Yeah, that's so cool. If you could like summarize in a nutshell, like the purpose of like why are we born on earth, and what should we strive for while we are here?
So Jews believe that the purpose of life is to become close to God. That we believe that God, being the ultimate, what we call chesed, or giving kindness, created this world in order to give to us. And so we then, especially in the Jewish faith, for Jews in particular, the idea is to bring God into this world, to raise up the mundane. That's a huge concept in Judaism. But in general, we believe that every human being has the same purpose, which is to connect to God and to feel his presence in their life and to bring him into this world in whatever way they know how.
Yes. Oh, it's so beautiful. I feel like that's one thing that I just admire about Jews. And I know a couple, but I've never, really gotten a chance to talk to them deeply about this. But I've always noticed that you guys have a really cool and deep sense of sacredness. And I love that about you guys. So is there a specific, that's the next question I want to ask you, is there a specific aspect of Judaism that you're excited about and that you want to share about? I get this question a lot, and honestly, like it's sometimes hard for me to explain because, one of the main things about Judaism is that we don't proselytize. So we don't believe that it's necessarily something that everybody has to subscribe to. We believe that, there's things that Jews do and there's things that non-Jews do, and we don't really have a separation between the two. So it's hard for me because it's more just, it almost becomes like a cultural thing. So I don't know if there's I think it's difficult for me to say what would I want to what would I be most excited about. But I think that there's a lot of beauty in the community, and I think I find a lot of meaning in a lot of the holidays, or just the actual things that we do. I think people don't realize how much of our lives are just really set by being Jewish, by practicing the Torah. It's there's almost nothing that we do that isn't dictated by the Torah, even down to how you tie your shoes and things like that. And so I think that kind of stuff, it sounds really, out there or really crazy to a lot of people, but in essence, what it is it's infusing God into every aspect of your life. And I think that that's a really beautiful element. I know that that's shared with other faiths as well. But I think that, also just the feeling of the family aspect when you're with other Jews. And so I think there's really there's two things. There's really the Jewish, community, and then there's Judaism, the Torah, and those kind of things are separate, but connected. And so I think that, there's aspects of, for example, we have tremendous amounts of organizations within the Jewish community in order to help our community, Jewish people and non-Jewish people. So, for example, we have Hatzalah, which is a private ambulance system that a lot of Jewish communities have, which tends to be a lot faster than the government, ambulances and things like that. And people will, even yesterday when I was in synagogue, so normally on Shabbos, you're not allowed to have any electronics, right? You're not allowed to use phones or anything like that. But in the case of saving a life, you're allowed to. So even when you're sitting in shul or in synagogue, you'll hear the walkie-talkies going off, announcing this person needs help in this area. And then they get into their cars and go. And that's a really beautiful thing. The amount of charity organizations that we have for just about any organization you could possibly imagine, any illness or whatever it is, you can always find. My father was actually involved a couple years ago. Somebody messaged him saying that he was having kidney failure, and he didn't know what to do. My father actually put him in touch. There's a Jewish kidney donation organization. And partially that's because there is a genetic component that we hope that you'll find a match within the Jewish community, but also just that there are so many people who want to help, and something as extreme as that. But you kind of just see that aspect of the Jewish community, I think, is so beautiful. And then in terms of actual practicing Judaism, I think that there's a lot of beauty to be found in the lifestyle of being a practicing Jew, and the holidays and things like that. So we can go into more depth if you have specific questions. And I just want to say, you mentioned that you think it's a beautiful aspect of Judaism, and I agree. I actually didn't know about that little community thing that you shared just now, and I think it's so beautiful. I think it's important for two reasons. First, I think and some people may not agree with me, but I believe that community is a really important aspect of spirituality. Like, I don't think that, like practicing spirituality in a vacuum is good for me personally. I love the community aspect. And second of all, I think community aspect is so important just for like well-being while we're here on earth. It's it just tremendously increases the quality of life of everyone when community is helping each other and when it's connected. So I love that. Does that come from more like culture and history, or does that actually come from like Torah and commandments?
It actually comes from both. From the Torah side of it, there's actually a commandment that men in particular have to pray with what we call a minyan, which is a group of 10 men. And so that necessitates that you live near 10 other Jewish men. So that is, a reason why Jews tend to live, in what we call Jewish communities, right? You'll go to areas, especially if you're going to an area where religious Jews live, and it's like, it'll be entirely Jewish because we tend to live near each other. But I think from a historical point of view, unfortunately, there were a lot of times where Jews were, lived in ghettos and things like that. And so it was almost like a forced community. But I think that was seen, there's almost like a nostalgia for that these days in a weird way, which is that there was a time when there wasn't any assimilation, there wasn't any, non-religious Jews. And part of it was just because of the historical context where Jews were not accepted in life. And so they were forced to live together. And within the Jewish community today, there is a little bit of that nostalgia, not necessarily for the persecution aspect of it, but the idea of this, like the shtetl or the more simple lifestyle. There's a little bit of a nostalgia for that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you touched on the persecution side, and that's something that I also wanted to talk about today because I think it's such a sad and at the same time interesting aspect, because I personally believe that persecution is oftentimes a sign of that you're on the right track, because I believe that the forces of evil or Satan or whatever you call it is doing what they can. And whenever I hear about a certain faith being persecuted, I just immediately feel compassion and like desire to learn, okay, what do they believe in? What is it that got them into this position? Because it probably means that they're like hitting a spot,
So it's actually interesting. One of the things that you mentioned was about like the evil forces or Satan. This is actually not a Jewish belief. That we don't believe that there are external forces that are working against us, that we do believe that everything good and bad comes from God. And that even, bad things that seem bad to us may not actually be bad, right? It may feel bad, but at the end, there's a grand plan, there's a grand design. So we actually don't believe that any of the persecution comes from Satan or an evil outside force working against us. It's actually pretty foretold. Like it's not all that difficult. If you read the Torah, if you read the later prophets, this is basically what they were saying is you better shape up or that you're going to face a whole lot of hurt. And here we are. So I think also there's a concept in Judaism that when bad things happen to, I guess you could really expand this to anybody, but when bad things happen, especially to the Jewish people, that the rest of the world sees this and it brings them to repent. Which I kind of feel like, is this why we get so many Holocaust films? I don't really know, but certainly there's, like this aspect. We wish it didn't come in the form of persecution, but yeah, this is persecution of Jews is like the oldest story. It's nothing new.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's actually super cool and super beautiful. I love that you accept everything as like this is God's plan. Everything is going according to His will, and that's actually really beautiful. I think I really like that, and I think I want to adopt more of that in my life. You already mentioned a little bit about how you worship, but could you tell a little bit in more detail, how do you guys worship God and practice Judaism?
So, like I said before, it's a little bit hard to explain because there's really, it's not like, there's, you go to church, or you go to synagogue, or you go to shul, whatever it is, and then then the rest of your life is not connected to Judaism. There's very little there's your entire life is really involved in Judaism for almost every single moment. So for example, when I wake up in the morning, the first words that we say is Moda'ani, which is a prayer where we're thanking God for waking us up in the morning. And then the next thing that I do is I wash my hands. We have a ritual way of washing our hands to remove any impurity. And there's just every step of the day, there are things that we are doing constantly to ground ourselves in ourselves and in our spirituality. We have, every time you walk in and out of a room, there's on the doorpost we have a mezuzah that you're supposed to reach up and kiss, and in that mezuzah is written down different portions of the Torah that we're supposed to constantly be reminding ourselves. The way that we dress. Obviously, there's aspects of spirituality in that. Again, like I said, it's a little bit hard for me to say because it's almost like a cultural thing as well. It becomes like a cultural thing as well, where there is obviously there are set times that we pray and there are set prayers that we have, but there's also just our entire lives are meant to be involved with God and with our faith and with the Torah.
Mm-hmm. That's I love that. I just love how you put God into every single second of your life and everything you do. I think it's so beautiful, and I want to be more like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like people, because I've grown up in it, it becomes very natural. But even things like, again, this might sound a little bit strange, but even after, using the bathroom, there's a prayer that you say. And the idea is to, you want to stop and thank God for the fact that your body works properly. And this was actually a couple years ago, my brother was diagnosed with cancer. And so I wanted to take on something after that to kind of remind myself of a time period that was very difficult. And I decided that was going to be something that this prayer, which we call Asher Yatzar, which is the prayer that you say after using the bathroom, I was like, I'm going to just say it slowly, because a lot of these things you can become rote. It's, it sounds really amazing, but if you've been doing it for 30 years, it becomes very, just, by rote. And I wanted to, say, okay, I'm going to stop and really think about this and think about the fact that my body works correctly and that I wake up and I don't have to worry about my health, and things like that. So I think those are, some aspects of Judaism and the Torah that I also really love.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. I actually wanted to come back to something that you said before, and I think that's super unique and super interesting in Judaism. You said that you guys don't. I'm not sure what's the correct term you said, but you don't proselyte and you don't try to convert people to your faith, because it's unique to your heritage and unique to your culture, which I think is awesome. But if someone approached you and they were like, "Hey, I wanna up my spiritual life," what advice would you give that person?
That's such a great question. I think part of it, I just wanted to clarify, it's not that Judaism is only for Jews. It's just that we don't believe that you need to be Jewish in order to have, reward in the world to come or to live a fulfilling life. And we believe that the laws that were given to us are specifically for us. But it's not like an exclusivity thing. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I think that there are a lot of people that are called the B'nai Noach. So there are people who believe in the Torah and believe in God, but they are not Jewish. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. It's so fascinating, but there are people who they believe in the Torah and but they're not Jewish. And that's that they find that the Torah to be true. They believe in the Torah, but they don't want to become Jewish. They like eating cheeseburgers and things like that, and that's totally okay with us. And so there are what's called the 7 Noachide laws. And I think that that's a pretty good basis. And I think that a lot of, again, without getting into specific religions, I think there are a lot of religions that kind of fall within that. And there are some conversations within the Jewish community of, does, for example, Christianity fall within the Noachide laws and things like that? But without going into too much detail, a lot of them are just, the Noachide laws are, don't steal, don't have, immoral relationships, set up courts, don't eat the flesh of living animals. Like, they're very basic things. So, and that we believe that if you follow those 7 rules, that you're gonna, have a good, fulfilling, meaningful life.
Okay, that's so cool. Could you tell me, so I think you mentioned 3. Could you tell me about the other ones?
So let me see if I can go through all of them. So the first one is, I'm just translating in my head. The first one is Aver Menachai. So that's not eating the flesh of living animals, which I think to us, especially in the West, we were like, how is that a thing? But I guess, it was a thing. You're also not allowed to, we call it Berchas Hashem, which is blessing God, because we're not going to say the word curse. Stealing, setting up proper courts, worshiping idols, immorality, immoral relationships, and killing. Those are the 7 Noahide laws. Pretty standard, pretty basic. I think if somebody was coming to me and asking me for spirituality, though, because I was thinking back to what your original question was, I think there are other ways that you can, find meaning and spirituality in your life without just stripping it down to those kind of very basic things. Like, I think if somebody's coming to me, they're probably not doing most of those things. So I think that there are, other things. I think that prayer is a big one. That, just talking to God, it doesn't have to be, like, we pray in Hebrew, and we do believe that the words themselves are very powerful, but it doesn't, you don't need to, even just talking to God, just conversationally, I think can add a lot of spirituality in your life, and looking for God in your life, I think, can be another way to add spirituality to your life.
I love that. Even before I ask you that question, I feel like if I could adapt one thing from Judaism, I would, start eating kosher. I just really love those rules because they really make sense from the standpoint of like being healthy. So for those who don't know, could you tell us a little bit more about that? What is kosher food?
So first, I'm kind of laughing here because the idea that like kosher goes hand in hand with healthy, yeah, that would be wonderful if it did. There is one of the commandments in the Torah is to keep your body healthy. You have to take care of your body as well. But that being said, we eat a lot of unhealthy things, especially the Ashkenazi Jews. We eat a lot of fried foods. We eat a lot of stuff in oil. So so I wouldn't say like if somebody's saying I'm looking for a healthy diet. I don't know if like strictly being kosher is gonna help you, but that being said, but there are some things I think with especially the way that we consume meat. There are the ways that animals are slaughtered. There's certain aspects that I think a lot of people do buy kosher meat because it's seen as being better grade. In fact, like the kosher butcher in my town, in my city, told us that he gives all of the stuff that he doesn't put on sale to McDonald's. So like they come to him and all of the stuff that we can't eat, they basically give to McDonald's. So I was like, that's an interesting insight. But so the basis of kosher, there's a couple different aspects of it. One aspect is there are certain animals that we don't eat. We only eat animals that have split hooves and chew their cud. So that's, cows, for example. And we also do not mix dairy and meat. So we're not allowed to eat dairy and meat at the same time. And in fact, today we're even more stringent where if you eat meat, we do not eat milk. We do not eat any dairy products for 6 hours after that. There's differences of opinion. So there are some people, for example, German Jews, they only wait 3 hours. But that's like an extra precaution because of we don't want to even mix again, getting kind of like into the nitty gritty here, but how long it takes for meat to process through your body. So, so that's another element of it, that we do not mix meat and dairy. There's also for fish, we only eat fish that have fins and scales. And then for birds, there's basically just a list of birds that we're allowed to eat. But what it comes down to is we don't eat animals that consume other animals. We don't eat animals that are scavengers. We don't eat bugs. Those are the basic rules. And then on top of that, there are requirements for for example, like how do I know if packaged food is kosher, right? Like if I pick up a bag of chips, like how do I know if it's kosher or not? Because you might think like, well, it's potato chips, like what could possibly be in it? So we also have specific certifications that you can find on most packaged food that have little symbols on them with an OU or a star K, or there's many different ones. Each city usually has their own. And that means that somebody called a mashgiach was at the factory where it was made and made sure that nothing was going into it that would be a problem for us.
That's so cool. I love that. I wanted to thank you for explaining a little better because I don't know everything about kosher. I just knew some things. Like, I knew that you guys don't eat pork, and I'm like anti-pork. Like, I think it's so unhealthy. That, yeah, you separate certain foods from each other, which I took a nutrition class in school, and I actually found out that certain things, when you eat them together, they decrease the nutrients in each other, which I thought was so interesting. So I kind of like subconsciously connected like those two. I think I also knew that the animals need to be slaughtered in like a certain humane way, which I also really liked. So yeah, thank you for telling me more about that.
Sure. I mean, yeah, kosher it's one of the, I think, more well-known aspects of Torah and Judaism, but it's also, I think, very, very complex. Like, I don't even know all of the, all of the stuff that goes into it. It's very complex. Yeah, I mean, also I forgot we also don't eat fish and meat at the same time. So just another rule to add on. I can tell you, just kind of staying on this topic, when we were planning to go to Dragonsteel. So because of all of the restrictions that we have, and because of all of the, different, aspects that go into, existing as a Jew, we decided that a bunch of Jews all wanted to go, especially this year. Dragonsteel was over Shabbos, over a Saturday, which just elevates the complication. But we also basically had to bring a lot of food with us because we didn't know what kind of kosher food we could get out in Utah. And when we got there, we went to the supermarket just to get some like basic stuff that we could get, like ketchup or, things like that. And we actually found that there was a kosher supermarket. There was a supermarket in Utah that sold kosher meat and kosher cheese. And we were like so excited. But it was also really complex just being in the house. We had to like self-clean all the ovens. And there's also like a lot of stuff that goes into that as well. So it was a whole project.
That's so interesting. I actually wanted to ask you more about Shabbat. Could you tell us like, when does it start? When does it end? And what are the basic things that you observe?
Yeah, so Shabbos starts Friday night. It starts at sundown and goes till sundown on Saturday night. So it's 25 hours, and it comes from the idea that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, and so we try to emulate God in all things, and so we rest on the seventh day as well. Shabbos is also one of the things that was given specifically to Jews, and it is for us, and it's called like an os hiliolam, which means like it's a treaty forever. It's something that's between us and God, and the idea is really to stop whatever you're doing, leave all of the mundane behind, and to just have one day where you're focused on your relationship with God, where you're focused on your family, where you're focused on just enjoying life. Like, you're supposed to eat good foods. We eat a lot of food on Shabbos. You're supposed to have wine. You're supposed to have meat. You're supposed to wear beautiful clothing. And the idea is really just to separate the regular weekday, your work. You're supposed to stop doing all work, and just have a day to rest. And that can be in a physical sense, like actually there's, people actually take naps, but it can also just be in the sense of just removing yourself from the mundane, just removing yourself from every day, which I think was something this is something that turns out to be even more useful today, I think, than it would have been thousands of years ago, because today we are so heavily connected to everything at all the time. And to have one day where you are not in touch with you're not on your phone, you don't know what's going on in the outside world, you're just spending a day with your friends and family, you're just spending a day, enjoying like life, has become something that I think even a lot of secular Jews have started taking on, and even non-Jews have started taking on, just this idea of disconnecting for a day and just allowing your mental space to be cleared, allowing your physical space to be cleared. So that's I guess the essence of Shabbos. And then there's other things that go into it as well. But I think that it's something that having lived with it for 30 years, I don't understand how people don't have it. I don't understand. Like, for me, it's like by the time we get to Shabbos, I'm like, I'm so done. Like, the week is so crazy. You're running around, you're doing all these things, and you're like, thank God, I just have one day where I'm just relaxed. I don't have to worry about anything. I'm not driving here and there. I'm not worrying about work. I'm just sitting on the couch. I'm relaxing with my family. So I think it's one of the more beautiful aspects of Judaism as well.
Oh, I love it. I love that too. Like you said, it's a really beautiful aspect. And it's so funny because I grew up Christian, and we have the Sabbath too. But for me, it was like, it's so funny. And I'm kind of ashamed to admit that. But to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. I can't be productive. To me, like growing up, Sunday was kind of like the boring day. So I love it that for you, it was like the day of rest that you really was looking for and enjoyed. And I think as I'm growing up and I'm like connecting with spirituality more, I think I'm starting to like Sabbath more now. And I was actually curious. I was going to ask you, what do you usually do on Shabbat?
So there are certain things that we do specifically. So for example, Shabbos first starts with lighting the candles. This is something that's specific for women. There are specific commandments that are only for women, and this is one of them. So we light the candles as Shabbos comes in, and there's a prayer that we say, and that officially begins with Shabbos. For many people, they only start doing this once they're married. In my family, we started at 12. So this is, it's a difference of different families do different things. So you kind of start with that, with bringing in Shabbos with candles. And then usually that my father and my brothers will go to shul or to synagogue, and they say the evening prayers, and there's added prayers for Shabbos as well. And then they come home and we have our Friday night meal. There's a lot of like, I guess, traditional Jewish foods, things people think of like chicken soup and stuff like that are kind of like standard. And usually you sit around the table for a couple hours and you're talking about your week. You're talking about, anything that a family might talk about. Usually you share some words of Torah as well. And then after the meal, we usually just, I'll read, or I'll talk to my family, or I'll, talk to friends, whatever it is. And then Shabbos day has a similar pattern. So in the morning, again, you go to shul, you go to synagogue, you come home, there's another meal. And then after that, really, you have the rest of the day to kind of do whatever you'd like. A lot of people learn Torah, or people read. I love to read. This is where I get a lot of my reading time done. Going to visit friends or talking to family, taking naps, things like that. There is a small meal at the end of the day, which is called Shalosh Seudos, because you're supposed to have 3 meals over Shabbos. And then at the end of Shabbos, we have another ceremony called Havdalah, which is, again, there's a lot of like the Kabbalistic things that go into sort of the ending of Shabbos, where you want to send Shabbos off. And we, again, have a candle. And this time, Havdalah is generally performed by a man. This is another Jewish concept where women are the ones who build, women are the ones who connect, women are the ones who bring things into the world, men are the ones who separate. So this is why most women will not perform Havdalah, because it's a separation, it's a breaking of Shabbos. But there's a lot of things that go into Havdalah, where we have a candle, we have wine, you smell certain spices. There's a whole kind of ritualistic aspect to it. That is the end of Shabbos. And that's basically like the rundown of like exactly what happens over the course of the day. It's mostly just like it's a time to relax and unwind and reconnect.
Oh, I love that. And I actually really love what you mentioned about different purposes of women and men. Recently in my life, I've been really into studying that and understanding that and feeling that the difference between the feminine and masculine energy, and differences in how we're built and our like purposes. And I love that you mentioned that. That's really cool. And I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions, and one of them is there like a spiritual experience in your life that happened to you, or a spiritual lesson you learned that you wanted to share?
I think, well, first of all, we were talking about Shabbos before, and I was going to bring that up as sort of like, I think this is something that, a lot of people could adopt, maybe not like taking on Shabbos in particular, but the idea of like disconnect, I think, has become something in today's world that is very valuable. There's also another concept we didn't really talk about, but this is another, big concept in the Jewish community called Shmiras Halashon, which translates to watching your speech. And this is the idea that we do not gossip. We don't speak about other people. There are like really, really strict rules about what you're allowed to say about other people. You're never supposed to like talk about other people. And this is like this is a really big element of Judaism. And especially today, this is something that, in the Jewish community that we've been working very, very hard at. A lot of people will learn every single day the different laws of speech. And I think that this is a really beautiful thing. I think especially in a world right now where there's, you know, a lot of people are, you know, are castigated, are put down for things that they have said. We see a lot of people talking about other people. We have whole like gossip channels on YouTube, and like, you know, they can definitely be fun to listen to. But I think that this is something that I never realized how, you know, how much it really adds a beauty to your life when you're not talking about other people, when you're focused on yourself. And I'm not going to say that I'm always perfect at this, but I think I remember when I was in college, one time, like somebody turned to me, you know, a friend in the class, and she just said something about another student, something that was like an uncharitable thing. And I remember being like really taken aback for a second. And then I was like, oh yeah, like I remembered that in, you know, outside of my community, this isn't something that everybody works on. And I was just so taken aback that somebody would like say something, you know, mean about somebody else. And again, it's not to say that this never happens, like nobody is perfect, but it was a really a big shock to me. I was really just wowed for a second of like, oh, you know, this is such a stark difference between, you know, between our communities, which I just think that like this is something that, you know, I'm working on. I think it would be a good thing in general for people to don't talk about other people. It's a pretty good lesson, I think, something that we can take it and apply it to our own lives. Yeah, I think, and in terms of like experiences that I've had, again, like because my life is like so intensely wrapped up in Judaism, I think that like a lot of the more difficult times in my life, like I talked about my brother getting sick, and that I really have felt, you know, God's presence in my life, and I've really felt, you know, that Him taking care of us. I think that, you know, obviously this has been a very, very tumultuous couple of months for the Jewish community, and one of the things that we have seen is a real coming back to the community. You know, the Jews famously like to argue. You know, it's like there's a famous saying of like, you know, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, and it's very apt. We like to argue about everything, and there's a lot of you know, especially recently, there's been a lot of division within the Jewish community, the religious Jews, non-religious Jews, and things like that. And I think within the last couple of months, we've seen a huge coming together, and I think that that's it's a beautiful thing, and I think that that's the goal. You know, the idea is to come together. Judaism is about bringing God's awareness into the world, and so that's, you know, something that we strive for, and hopefully that we're accomplishing.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much. Like, especially like things you said about watching your speech. Like, I really agree. Like, that's something that I think the whole world needs to work on. And I feel like we could really grow as the world in general if we adopted that practice in our lives and stop talking bad about other people or judging. I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, even just to, you know, expand on it for a little bit, it's sort of it's said that, like, you know, a bad word can actually be the same as killing someone, meaning that if you say something about somebody, that can almost equate to killing them, because you can destroy someone's reputation, or just the damage that words can do. The fact that once you say something, it can never be taken back. And so this is a big element in the Jewish community, and I think that yeah, like we said, I think that this is something that in general it would be a good policy.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That's super cool. The last thing I wanted to ask you about today is, first of all, Jewish like traditions and rules are so cool. I love them. And if someone like me wanted to learn more, where could we go? Is there a book, a movie, a website where we can go?
There are lots of books that you could learn about Judaism. There's, I guess, different books for different elements. If you want to learn about like Jewish philosophy, I'd recommend Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman. Rabbi Leib Kellerman has a book called Permission to Believe and Permission to Receive, which is really a lot about like the fundamentals of Jewish belief. Mm-hmm. If you're just looking for, you know, Jewish, you know, traditions and things like that, there are a lot of great YouTube channels that you can see, just, you know, Orthodox Jews and, you know, how we live our life. There's a lot of, now especially, there's a lot of TikTok and Instagram accounts that are dedicated to this in particular, mm-hmm. Where you can see just kind of like what, you know, day-to-day life Orthodox Judaism is all about. And so I think that there's different avenues. I think for people who really want more of a textual avenue, Art Scroll is a good place to go if you're just looking for a really good translation. If you're looking for how do Jews translate into English, so Art Scroll is a good place to go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being on this episode and telling me about Judaism. I loved it.
Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for being curious. And as usual, if you want to come to the podcast and share about your faith, or if you know someone, please reach out. Please, please, please. I want to learn from everyone. Well, thank you, everyone, and see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.